There are two main thought camps behind motivation to write a film. Do you write for yourself, or do you write for your audience? One big problem with this is that audiences don't always know what they want. It needs to be something familiar but different. And the other big problem is that if you're making a movie solely for yourself, the metric of quality is only you. That can lead to either low quality work or endless procrastination because it's never perfect. How will your film be popular if it's made for only one person? That doesn't mean that there won't be people who like what you like and enjoy your film, but I think there's a way to write for the audience and yourself. That is, write for the character. I have the tendency to daydream, and that does me a lot of favors in regard to storytelling. Coming up with characters is something that comes natural to me. Since I was a kid, I've been coming up with characters. I have sketchbooks upon dozens of loose leaf drawings of characters that have accumulated over the years. Only a handful of these characters actually have published work of any kind. It's very easy to come up with a look and some human traits to make you feel like you've got a fully fleshed out character. In reality, the grab bag of character traits with a face doesn't need to be in a story. They don't need to experience change, and I'd say that a character will always be incomplete until they need a story. And that's where my theory comes in. We watch movies for a reason. It could be entertainment or need for connection, to feel something deep or just have a good time. But there's a reason, and we make movies for similar reasons. It can be the lonely artist's desire to be seen, or the drive to make people feel something. Whatever the reason for watching and making movies, something drives us to do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't. Your character is the one who will be experiencing the movie, so they must be driven to experience it the same way you're driven to make it, and we are driven to watch it. Make a character that must go on a journey. Now, this said, I don't think this is something that you can force. I think preparation is very important, but my writing process is heavily affected by casting and directing. An example of this was on my film Lucky Jack Penny. In my preparation, I was making Jack someone who needed to interact with the other characters in order to go on a positive change arc. I was trying to make him someone that was too honest and too emotionally vulnerable. But once I figured out that I wanted my friend Joseph Malin to play Jack,
tree hugger, tree humper,
things started to change. As I wrote him, he felt more put together and like he didn't need to change. Those traits I gave him in the preparation turned out to be good for the other characters. He was causing change in them rather than changing himself. And the approach that Joseph took to the character was as if he had already faced some darkness within himself and had made peace with it to become a positive influence on others. Jack Penny ended up having a flat arc, which doesn't discredit the work I put in. I'd even gamble that the work I did beforehand greatly contributed to the story overall. And it's not a perfect film. I was learning a lot while I worked on it, but I am proud of the accomplishment. The point is, permit the character to adapt to the actor and the story. Don't force your pre-planned ideas onto it. But if you make a character that needs to go on the journey, then you'll be set up for success during the writing and directing process. Which brings me to another philosophy I have. If you're starting out on your filmmaking journey, you must write and direct. And I think these two practices have to influence each other. Going back to Lucky Jack Penny, or any of my films, I've written with people in mind. I can't make a no-budget movie without knowing my resources beforehand, and I imagine you can't either. So my first step to writing is usually casting, which is totally backwards, but it's been my best practice for a no-budget film. If you have friends or family that are open to being in your movies, you not only have to play to their strengths, but their interests as well. It's hard to motivate people to be in your film for free, unless you're offering them something that they want. I'll frequently ask what challenge an actor wants, what kind of part they're interested in playing, or a movie that they love. You'd be surprised how many people you know want to be in an action movie or want to have a death scene or whatever. When I was starting to write Phoebus, I asked my friend Orion what kind of role he wants to play, and he said a bad guy or a lovable rogue. So I wrote Snickers specifically for him, and it worked out perfectly. For Lucky Jack Penny, I needed a villain that was both fun and compelling. Back in Washington, my friends and I frequently did murder mystery dinners. At one of these dinners, my friend Stuart was playing the murderer. It was one of the few times that nobody caught the murderer because he was playing a drunk party boy. He really let his inhibitions fly, and I knew that that was the kind of energy I needed for Handsome Sebastian in Lucky Jack Penny. The acting challenge he wanted was to play a scene with intensity. The project goal for his character was to be comedic, so we tried to work both in.
You think, after everything I've been through, that I don't care? This is our family business! To send Alistair Bramford straight to hell like a rocket, Gorgiti, like a rocket!
On these longer projects that took months to complete, I would write and rewrite as we filmed. As we went along, it became clear that I didn't know how to end it. Also, spoilers for this film that nobody's seen. I knew that Handsome Sebastian had to die at the end, but I wasn't sure how. I wasn't sure who was going to do it. So knowing that Stewart is someone I can trust with the roles I cast him in, I asked him what he thought about who should take Handsome Sebastian out. Without hesitation, he said himself. I thought he was joking until I realized that it was true. And I know that's dark, but Handsome Sebastian is the type of character that wouldn't let himself be caught. Stewart had so much to contribute to this character. And that's another important part of this. Don't get too precious with what you write. You're not going to start out with your magnum opus. The stories that are most important to you need to wait until you've perfected your craft. I make sure that I'm open to feedback and ideas by telling stories that are fun, but aren't the thing I'm waiting to tell. They're not the most important story to me. I want to let the actors inject themselves into the story. I write the lines, but if the actors need to change them to be easier to say, I want that. I've gotten lines that are much better than what I wrote by permitting changes. At the same time, you have to stick to your guns on some things. In Phoebus, the last line was meant to be a nod to Casablanca.
Our expenses. Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
But the actress said it didn't make sense, and she's right. Phoebus was a romance and the line is friendship. In real life, that doesn't make sense. I wanted to be collaborative, so we changed it.
Sneaky, I think this could be a good start to a beautiful thing.
And afterward, I kinda regretted it. So on the next film, Lucky Jack Penny, I pushed back at some points. After Jack gets hit in the head, he says,
Jiminy Christmas!
Joseph pointed out that this wasn't very realistic. So I asked him for some ideas. He told me what he thought would be better, and at the end of it, I directed him to go with the written line, because the realism wasn't necessarily the point of that scene, and it was more comedic for him to say Jiminy Christmas. And if you're like me, and confrontation is something you're still learning, I have something that can help. A project goal or a scene goal gives you a scapegoat to keep from being the bad guy. If the scene goal is be as comedic as possible within the genre of the film, then when somebody presents you with an idea that doesn't match that, you fall back on the scene goal. Yeah, that's a good idea, but it doesn't fit the goal of the scene. Remember, this is a Western and the scene is dramatic. That way you're not shutting down collaboration while maintaining control of the project. And film is a collaborative medium, but films made by committee end up being trash. It's really important to have one vision that drives the project forward. That's why writing and directing is better for your first few films. You need to be the captain of the ship and have a spine to say no to some things. That doesn't mean being a tyrant, but if you've written the screenplay, then you are the expert on that story, and you know more about it than anyone else. Not to mention that writing the story can improve your directing. Writing characters with people in mind helps me imagine ahead of time how I want to direct that individual. Directing less experienced actors is a whole job in and of itself. You're teaching acting classes while you direct. I've been very fortunate to have people who are pretty natural actors, but I've still needed to give them tips. If I know the person already, it's easier to consider what I might need to say to them, because each actor needs different direction. They must be treated as individuals. But here are a few general things you can do and say, such as remaining calm, and if you are not calm, act calm. Don't rush your direction, or your actors will rush their performance. Don't call action or cut. Be like Clint Eastwood and say things like, whenever you're ready, and that's enough.
I learned a lot from Clint. Very importantly, it's an anecdotal thing that he doesn't say action or cut. But what it does is it creates this world where the difference between the time when you're not shooting to the time when you're shooting it all becomes one process.
It can help the actor feel more in control, and less like they have to start a race at the sound of a starting gun.
You're rolling, maybe? Okay, whenever you're ready, Lindsay.
It also keeps the atmosphere between takes more professional. Use visual and emotional language. If you can give your actors something to do or something to think about, that will help their performance. Some actors do better with an emotion that they can reference, so encourage them to remember a particular emotion and let it out. Other actors do better with something to do, something to fiddle with, knowing where to look. Give them something to do visually for the camera. That way they don't have to worry so much about what they might look like. An example of this is if you have a scene between two characters and one of them is angry, and you need to get that performance out of that fresh actor, have them clench their fists, have them think about where they feel anger in their body, give them something to do. A lot of first-time or recently started actors spectator themselves. They view themselves from a third-person perspective that causes performance issues. Helping to ground them in the moment with physical things to do can break them out of that. Sometimes it can be helpful to demonstrate for them what you want. I find that this is more true in regards to the motions that they go through rather than the emotional performance. If you're trying to show them exactly how to do their performance, it's going to feel condescending. As far as I can tell, actors don't like that. And lastly, inform your actor as much as you can about the story beforehand so they can know how they fit into it. Each character is an extension of the story. They all have some part to play, some role in the grand narrative. And if your actor knows that beforehand, it's easier for them to know and remember what to do. Nothing is more helpful than preparation. And if you can't prepare with your actors, then prepare for your actors. While you write the script, consider what kind of direction you can give to really help the performance. Do your best to fit it to them, and maybe take notes to remember what you want to say on set. Write lines of dialogue that sound natural to the person you've cast. Make the focus of the line easy to remember. I try to avoid repetitive meaning within separate lines within one scene. That way the scene will flow from one point to another without any hiccup points where they might forget their line or jump around from thing to thing. Most actors I work with have day jobs and don't have a ton of time to put into memorizing lines. So I encourage them to focus on what the lines mean and memorize the intention behind it. That way, if they remember the meaning, they can use their own words and the final scene will flow. Give each character something unique to say, and it'll help the actors remember their part. Another benefit I've had from writing my own films is that if there are any complications, I know the story well enough to make rewrites at any given point of the process, and if needed, I can jump in to fill the part. That's what happened on my most recent short film, Death by Dionysus. I wrote the part for an actor I wanted to work with, but he became unavailable. So I checked with 2 other actors, but we were getting too close to the shoot to look past those 2, and neither of them could do it. So I stepped into the role. Acting and directing is something I'm still figuring out because when you're in a role, other people think that there's a vacuum where the director needs to be, and inevitably somebody else will start giving out direction. A way to combat that is by addressing it to everyone beforehand. Listen guys, I'm acting in this film, but I'm still the director. Please don't give anybody direction, that is my job. This works if you can stick to it. And if you can take time to talk with the cinematographers beforehand and really block out what you want, then you definitely should be able to maintain your directing position. As a director, you have to divide your attention in multiple different ways. If you haven't written the screenplay yourself, then it is much easier to lose track of the story. So, in the end, all of this adds up to the simple idea. If you want to make no-budget films, then you must write and direct. There's more to be said about the benefits of additionally editing your own film, but perhaps that's a topic for another day. In the meantime, write for your characters. Keep your actors in mind, prepare to direct, be collaborative but firm, and make movies. Oh, and like and subscribe.